Hey everybody, my name is Blanchard Seniff, and I'm a colorblind artist. Kind of weird. But let's get to the elephant in the room. What is apneaism? Apneaism is a compilation, really a play on words of the term apnea and ism. Ism for my art history background, and apnea, which probably defined in the medical industry, which is roundly considered as without breathing, or in the term of this exhibition as holding one's breath. But apnea means a lot more to me than just holding your breath. It means a key to the gateway to my passion, which is spearfishing. I learned spearfishing from my Navy family, of which we've moved around lots of places around the world, all of which goes to the water. And when my dad would come home from deployment, he would teach me how to spearfish. But one thing that my family has taught me to really appreciate spearfishing to the maximum is the pride in reducing the amount of space between the source and the table. A lot of hunting and gathering techniques, and spearfishing, in my opinion, is one of the most conservational acts of engaging with the ocean. In that conservation specificity, spearfishing is so selective that you can even choose the sex, the gender, and the age of the species you're targeting. And in spearfishing, we practice a technique called release and catch instead of catch and release. You're able to be highly selective and engage with the surrounding environment at a very maximum and extreme level. And then one more thing about spearfishing that makes me really appreciate it is that the most humbling aspect, I think, is that you're not the biggest predator in the ocean. But operating in apnea is the art form, and that's what spearfishing is. And so in my spearfishing journey, trying to maximize my time under the water, I've had to really pull apart what apnea means as an art form. And apnea provides this really unique mind-body alignment where you're extremely calm in the brain, clear sense of clarity, and that gives you the ready-made sense of control over your body. Take control of the physiological reflexes, such as controlling your blood flow, controlling your heart rate, and really making yourself belong in an aqueous culture. And so that is the essence of my exhibition, the apnea. What has apnea taught me? And so I want you to go throughout my exhibition and see the aspects of which apnea has made me appreciate more while I'm in this heightened relaxation state, and what I'm really paying attention to, such as color, form, species under the water, and the tensions between them, the surface of the water, how light is refracted, the coloristic choices unique to only the aqueous culture, and really pay attention to that. And so I really think that the best pieces that encapsulate the apnea series is my apnea series over here, which is a 4 smaller canvases in which I took the practice of apnea into a more literal sense and into a more literal process. So take, for example, these 3 pieces here I did in one breath hold. And I really had to rely on the techniques and skills that I learned from spearfishing and take it into painting. And so this was a really really fun place for me to work. Whereas this piece over here is a compilation of 4 breath holds. But here you really get to see the intentionality behind a dive. And I'm really trying to get as close to treating the canvas like a singular dive. In the decision-making, the grace under pressure that apnea lets you exert in. And that's what I was trying to capture in these. And so then throughout the rest of the exhibition, if you pay particularly close attention to the breath or the number of breaths that it took to make all these pieces to really drive home the essence of what you do with your breath. And so that's what I want to leave you guys with today is what are you going to spend your breath on? Because this is what I spent my breath on. So thank you guys for coming. I want to take this time before questions to pay specific attention to the people who helped this exhibition come to fruition. I want to thank my studio mate, Sarah Jackson. Thank you so much for the timeless hours we've spent up in the studio. I want to thank the entire art faculty, especially Katie Sinclair, Court Savage, Tyler Starr, and especially to Leah Newman for helping me set up this gallery, and to the interns who helped set up the canvases on the wall, like Isabel, Oliver, Brown, and Sarah. I really appreciate it. And anyway, thank you guys so much. That's what I got for you. So let's go to questions. Where is it?
It's right here. It's that little bit there.
Oh, I see. Wait, Blanche, can you hear this?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So wait, like you did it in like one breath, like all the colors and like everything?
Thank you, Charlie. Yes, I didn't do all of them in one breath. I did this series, these three under one breath. I put the time too, and that was to create a viewer interaction so that you not only know how I treat the canvas as a dive, but really challenge you as a viewer to really be more pensive about what you can do underneath one breath hold without, of course, blacking out or anything like that. But yeah, so these three are in one breath. So you can really see how much information, form, what is recognizable, and really going towards that notion of what is the purpose of a dive? What is, is it getting the fish, or is it just, interacting with the environment? And for me, it's interacting with the painting as a medium. So yeah, hope that answered your question.
Okay.
Hey, Blanche.
Hey, how you doing, Shaw?
Good. I was just interested in maybe the changes in the way your marks were made as you moved toward the end of that breath. Is there a sense of urgency? Is there a sense of calmness? Is it both? Does it get frantic? Do you get close to passing out? What is that process as your air deletes itself?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because I was thinking about that when I was making that. It was a big conflict because in spearfishing, what I've been trained to do is if you panic, that is the worst thing you can do when you're underwater. You really have to stay calm. But then in the art making practice, it was almost flipped, because when I was running out of breath and I had maybe, 5 strokes on there, I was like, oh my gosh, I have nothing on the canvas. I have to work faster, agitated. But then I had to push back and really rely on, well, I can move intentionally, but really not panic, if that makes sense. I'm really trying to make the canvases united in the sense of a dive, but at the same time, the key is not to panic. So stay consistent with the mark making.
Did your stroke change?
The stroke changed in comparison to how many more breaths I had with the bigger pieces. In this way, it's a little more primal, like the diving itself. You're really put back into an environment where you just have your breath as your lifeline, and it's just you engaging with the environment for a short duration of time for that breath. And so I feel like that's reflected in the mark. It's not as pensive and calm, and well, I guess it is calm, but not as collected and put together and pre-thought as a lot of these other pieces where I had to go kind of like no one dive is the same. No one mark is the same.
Hi, Blanche, it's Jane. I'm curious, what artists influenced you most in this exhibition?
Right, so my art history background, I'm a big advocate for 19th century French painting, oil painting. So Eugene Delacroix has always been kind of a pointing star for me, but not in the sense of trying to resuscitate that mode of painting. But a big artist that just passed away recently was Stanley Meltzoff. He's an underwater painter, also a former art historian, but went into advertising. We both have pretty similar career kind of visions. And so he really inspired me because of the way that he handles light and the surface of the water and fish in general, but trying to bring that level of history painting to, unfortunately, a world that's going away at the current rate. So yeah, so Stanley Meltzoff and Robert Bateman and Eugene Delacroix.
Hey Blanche, can you please explain a little bit just how you've learned paint mixing and how that process has developed throughout your time here, seeing colors in kind of a different way? How do you go about that process, and kind of what have you learned from that, or how have you grown in that way?
Definitely. Thanks, Eli. The painting process that I do with mixing, since I'm colorblind, trying to make my colorblindness a little more active in the sense that I've covered all of the names of the paint color in my studio so that I can rely more on my eye intuition. And so I feel like in a lot of these pieces, you're seeing my colorblindness in reverse so that the color is more vibrant, because I have to make it more vibrant for me to see it in the right tonality. So I hope the tones are on point, but the color mixing, I use a palette knife, pretty traditional. I use linseed oil as my mixing medium and Gamma-Sol to thin the paint. And yeah, using some oil, regular oil painting, not the high edition, but yeah, so really relying on my color blindness to give me the right sense of direction.
Hi, Blanche, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
So here's a question from the chat.
Gotcha.
What is the most amount of breaths you have had on one piece?
So I'm trying to think. So I use the breath as a metric, as a value system throughout this exhibition that unites all the pieces together. And I believe it was maybe the cave painting over in the far back right corner. And I think we're gonna pivot over there. I think that was around 35,000 breaths. Yeah. All right, that was 20. So I think it was this one actually. Yeah. It's weird when you're in the state of flow, when you're in a dive, time is elusive, but what is constant is your breath. So that's another reason why I made the breath be the metric in here. But I think this is the one that took the longest.
Great, thank you so much. And
Yeah, no problem.
here is another question. How do you understand art making as a documentation of the aquatic life?
How do I understand the, can you repeat that one more time?
How do you understand the process of art making as a documentation of the aquatic life?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, I guess the process of art making for aquatic life, I'm not trying to make these animals and these interactions live forever, but more of, I learn a lot from the forms that I see, especially as a practicing perspective artist. I'm trying to do more landscape work, but always trying to be a study. And so underwater life is totally different because of the magnification of water. Color is totally different. And trying to bring those feelings into water is way, unexplored subject matter, because I don't know, something floating is just in the middle of a canvas versus the feeling of floating is something that I think I'm going to go more into later in my work. But yeah, that's what I'm trying to learn. It's a big learning process painting underwater subject matter.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
What's up, Blanche? It's Tony.
Hey, Tony.
What's up, Blanche? So I think to the average viewer or listener, they might hear that you're colorblind and they might think of that as like a limitation, which obviously isn't true because all of your art is super dope. But like, was there any sort of mental preparation that you had to undergo? I know you already talked about how like with the palettes you had to approach that differently, but was there anything like mental wise, like preparation wise, that you had to change?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the pieces here really trying to work on perspective and how to push things farther back. So having to understand how, I guess, physics work, how light works, how to push an object farther into a two-dimensional surface, how to do that coloristically is really difficult, just for, I think, anyone. But for me, it's the mindset that I went into it is tackling it the same way anybody would try and approach pushing an object farther back, but really rely on the color intuition that I can see. It's weird. It's more of I have all the colors spread out in front of me, and I just have to rely on what I see will match the many photographic images that I'm working from.
Thank you.
One more.
Hi, Blanche. Here
Hey.
is another question from the chat.
Gotcha.
This one goes, artist palettes change when people move to new locations.
Mhm.
How did the move from South California to North Carolina change your color palette? Or were you not painting as much in San Diego? And how are your recent experiments in digital color, spaces shifting your approach to color?
Absolutely. So I think a running theme is blue throughout my exhibition, and having grown up in California for so long, closer to the coast, it's a little green, but when you just get out a couple miles, it turns into the most gorgeous blue ever. And juxtaposed to New England and North Carolina, where the water is way darker and can't really see that far. I really, I guess, being separated from, you try and return to California in my mind. And so I guess that color palette was using more blue because I'm really trying to re-engage in that space where I didn't have the opportunity to. Whereas versus here, I tried to take a lot of the muddy pictures out and try and bring a new aesthetic. And then I hope that answered the question. Two more questions? Okay.
Hey, Blanche. How does the light refraction and the different colors you see underwater change the process you go through when you're painting as opposed to something you're painting above the water?
That's a great question. It's really interesting because what you see on a photograph, you have to kind of go into it with the mindset that there was a flash of some kind. So in order for the painting to read like you're under the water, your natural instinct is just to add more blue, or for me, I think I add more purple or a type of very muted gray. So you have to go into it with what the color of the ocean will affect to the light. And then above water, I can only imagine it would be more vibrant, and that's kind of the rule book that I go by when I'm painting below or above water stuff.
Hi, Blanche.
Hey.
You just mentioned your work later. So what type of work do you envision in the near future? Is that more paintings?
I think definitely more paintings. I want to get into sculpture and casting, trying to bring a more three-dimensional aspect to my work, but I don't think I'll ever give up on painting. But my subject matter will grow out of spearfishing to being on, in, and under the water. So, but yeah, definitely trying to go more 3D and sculptural after this.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. I hope you all can come out and come into the exhibition and enjoy some wine and cheese and ask me any more questions if you'd like. Thank you guys again.